try. Good evening, glad you could make it. This time what I'm going to do is explore the one of the very popular sort of bankside discussions and debates. In fact, it can quite often turn into quite a heated row, and quite a popular one amongst fly fishers is the exact nature of fly fishing and some of the borderline branches, whether they are actually fly fishing, whether they can be defined as fly fishing or not. So I'm going to have a look at a few personal favourites of mine for debate purposes. Nothing to get too worked up about. It's just basically just blowing off a little bit of steam, and you'll have your own opinions about this, and I'd love to hear them. So here goes. Some of you may not be fly fishers yet and just considering it. Some of you have no intention of ever trying it and it doesn't appeal to you. But we have this sort of romantic vision of fly fishermen. I think non-fishers have this idea of somebody may be putting graceful long lines out, flicking them backwards and forwards over a sort of expensive chalk stream like the River Test or something like that. Well, we all have our own ideas of fly fishing, and I must admit, from my original sort of teenage conception of it, it was sort of a cool looking thing to do, very graceful, very artistic, and maybe small dry flies or maybe North Country spiders, something like that. And from what I can remember reading, the actual fly fishing using fly rods and fly lines came about because it was a question of presenting a bait which had virtually no weight of its own to cast with, and so the line was designed to carry the bait, the fly, out to the position where it was in front of the fish, some distance away from the angler. And so this to and fro swishing of the line came about, specially designed springy flexible rod and a light sort of bulky, quite bulky line compared with monofilament that would propel the fly towards the fish. The difference between fly fishing and bait fishing, as I've always understood it, is that with bait fishing the casting weight is the bait and terminal tackle itself, and the casting weight with fly fishing equipment is the actual line itself. So that's how I've always seen the difference, and I've come to question it a bit in recent years. Nothing to get too upset about, but it struck me when I was fishing, say for pike, quite heavy jig flies, and yet I'm still punching them backwards and forwards with a fly line, when in actual fact you could actually take them off the fly tackle, attach them to the terminal end of a spinning rod line, maybe put a swivel on and a little bit of additional weight, and they would cast off a fixed spool reel just as well. Maybe not quite as far, and maybe it didn't look quite so cool, but it could be done without fly tackle. And then there's also streamers, very effective early season method of fishing for trout on rivers and of course reservoirs. The original streamers were designed for lake trout, and more recently stock rainbows. Just lures basically that were cast on fly tackle. And of course, the streamer, I've got quite into it recently. I found it quite addictive. The severity of the take and the suddenness, the ferocity of it. It's quite exciting fishing, really, and quite effective in the early season when the classic fly fishing is probably at its least effective. So what about Euro nymphing? I'm going to use that term because there's so many sort of subdivisions of, well, I think what the Americans call is tight line nymphing, close range, deep nymphing, tight line nymphing, whatever. Basically, what the sort of different variations have in common is that no fly line is used. That there is a variation of it, in fact, that I use myself. I think it's how it started in Britain, really, when where you'd use a little bit of fly line outside the rod as a sort of swing tip, really, like a droop indicator. But generally, it's the use of a sighter somewhere down the line that sort of hovers around about the surface of the water. You basically cast upstream and across. When I say cast, more lob because there's no fly line involved. Yeah, lob a short line upstream and across. Let the nymphs come round across the front of you to a point very slightly downstream, then lift off and recast. And it's all about what they call the getting that perfect drift, where the bugs or nymphs or whatever you want to call them are just bouncing along the bottom of the river at the same pace as the current running through. The skill is getting that drift right and also spotting the indications. Apparently when you're nymphing, there's a lot of takes go completely unnoticed. So a really good Euro nympher, sort of competition standard anglers, can hit a lot of takes or bites, whatever you want to call them, that a sort of non-competent or semi-competent angler would miss. But I don't know, there's no fly line. Some of the nymphs that are used, the Perdion's one example, a lot of anglers describe them as having no class or style, which I don't know whether it's a good or a bad thing, but I sort of get the drift, pardon the pun there, because when you think of some of these fully dressed salmon flies, the beauty of them and the artistry involved, and even like a well-tied sort of traditional wet fly or dry fly, the sort of artistry that goes into that. When you look at sort of Euro nymphs with a standard gold, silver, or tungsten bead at the head, and then a sort of tapered body behind it with maybe the odd splash of colour. I don't know. It does lack style to me. Likewise, watching somebody Euro nymphing, no matter how skillfully, it never looks quite as elegant and stylish as proper fly fishing to me. So yeah, there's some debate about where Euro nymphing started. Some say it was Eastern European, I hesitate to call them peasants, Eastern European working folk that couldn't afford fly lines, or probably couldn't get hold of them, I don't know, in the communist bloc as it was in those days, and basically fishing for food. Also, the Americans claim to have invented it as well, so it's one of those things in the mist of time. It sort of started in this country when the Czech team sort of stormed the World Championship, River Fly Fishing Championship. I think when was it? 1987, something like that. And it sort of slowly caught on from that point, gathering momentum as we got into the 21st century. Prior to that, nymphing was upstream nymphing. a gentleman called Oliver Kite, a famous writer. I think it was Major Oliver Kite, if I'm correct about it. In the 50s and 60s, he was the sort of the guru of nymphing, and it was upstream nymphing, basically casting upstream the same as you would with a dry fly, only a nymph under the surface, and watch the tip of the line for an indication of a take, which is what I'm still doing now. Maybe it's me that's a bit of a dinosaur, I don't know. But there we go, Euro nymphing, which is an amalgam of what, Polish, Czech, and probably American nymphing, all rolled into one heading. Is it fly fishing? I'm not sure. We're not using a line, and the flies are criticised for having no style, so I don't know. Very popular, very effective indeed, which is why it's so widely used in competition. But is it fly fishing? Well, I hope that's been informative and a bit thought-provoking. Be sure to stick around for part 2, well, if you want to anyway. And don't forget to subscribe and like and possibly give us a comment. And share as well. See you later.